Lord of Mysteries. Fire of Destruction Chapter 261 to 270. Tingen City, Blackthorn Security Company. Scratching his eyes to try to get rid of the drowsiness, Klein could only sigh tiredly as he took a sip from his cup of coffee. He was more into tea, but these were difficult times, he needed that extra caffeine. I hope Clown brings a physical increase. This sleep thing will affect me sooner rather than later. Klein thought seriously as he took another sip. You look horrible, my good friend. Difficult nights. Leonard's poetic voice rang out as he entered the office and saw the dark circles under Klein's eyes. Just what I was missing, Klein thought, defeated, already being able to feel the headache. But hiding his emotions, Klein controlled his expression as best he could and looked at the poet calmly. Good morning, Leonard, how have you been? Leonard showed a pained expression as he sat down next to Klein. You hurt my heart, can't I worry about my friend who is almost as special as me? Leonard said with a smile as he rested his cheek on his gloved hand and looked amused at Klein, whose lips were trembling. Special, you say? Every day that passes I am more sure that you have a novel protagonist complex. Klein thoughtfully as he took another sip of his coffee. Seeing that he hadn't elicited a reaction from the seer, Leonard frowned somewhat in disappointment and settled into the sofa. Both were quite close, but their knees were not touching. In the past, this would have bothered Klein, but now he was used to the rather strange personality of the poet. But seriously, Klein, you have to try to get more sleep. You're not a sleepless, so lack of sleep will affect you. Leonard expressed his concern and Klein could only sigh. Leonard may be a little weird, but he means well. Klein thought as he looked at his friend with better eyes. Leonard now had a thoughtful expression as he scratched at the pile, his eyes narrowing slightly as he muttered something under his breath that Klein was unable to hear despite being quite close. Klein then also narrowed his eyes at Leonard. He couldn't help but feel that the guy had something annoying on his mind. He then watched as Leonard's green eyes widened and a big smile spread across his face. I could have sworn I saw the light bulb above your head go on. Klein thought suspiciously. Leonard then got up from the chair with an elegant step and looked at Klein with a smile worthy of a poet. I have something to help you relax. Would you like to join me on a small journey through the streets of Tingen? The light bulb went on because of the stupidity you give off. Klein thought flatly while raising an eyebrow. Shouldn't we be on duty here? Leonard's smile wavered slightly, but he immediately recovered and winked. No problem, my good friend, it's early so we have half an hour to spare. I promise we won't use even 20 minutes. Klein was still very unsure about what decision to make, although it would be more appropriate to say that he was looking for a way to refuse without hurting the poet's feelings. Should I be direct or more delicate? Harder or softer? Maybe if I do it hard he'll be more determined to get me out of here, but if I do it soft he won't understand and will keep bothering me. Klein seriously thought about what his next move would be. You have half an hour, come back here before 8 a.m. Both men froze and slowly turning their heads like old puppets, they looked at the source of the voice. Coming out of his office while cleaning his pipe was Captain Dunn Smith, who looked at them with a small smile directed towards Klein. I know you've been having a hard time, Klein, so I want you to try to rest more. He then looked at Leonard with a disapproving look. Though I do disapprove of you for wanting to get away from work for a while. Leonard chuckled awkwardly while scratching his head. Hee hee, sorry, Captain. Dunn shook his head slightly and continued, ignoring the embarrassed poet. I agree that it's something you need. Try to take advantage of this moment to relax a bit. Captain, Klein muttered in surprise, not knowing what to say. He couldn't help but look at the poet and immediately his expression soured a bit. Leonard looked at him with a look that said. Shaking his head, Klein looked at the captain and nodded. As you say, Captain, I think I do need a little rest after all. Dunn nodded, and with his clean pipe, he took some tightly wrapped tobacco from his pocket and filled the pipe. Just remember to come back by 8 a.m. Klein didn't say anything else. He got up and grabbed his cane and hat. He headed for the door, being followed by Leonard, who quickly got to his side. Neither of them left the room but stayed inside and gave each other a knowing look. 1, 2, 3. Ah, I almost forgot we have lunch at 2 p.m. Don't miss it, Dunn commented. There he is, both men thought with a smile and waited another few seconds in case the captain forgot to say something else. Ah, we also have a little meeting with the Punishers at 5 p.m. Ads by PubFuture. 15 minutes later, on Raveru Street. Taking a sip of the iced tea and feeling refreshed, Klein let out a pleased sigh and smiled. Just what I needed, he said with a smile, and Leonard, who was looking at this, smiled at him as he took a sip of his own iced tea. What did I tell you? They make the best iced tea in all of Tingen. the poet said proudly as they walked down the street. Klein nodded in agreement with the poet. At first, he hadn't taken what the man had said seriously. But after drinking the iced tea, Klein swallowed his words with gusto. And it costs the same as a normal iced tea. This was the best. Klein thought it would be more expensive, but no, the iced tea cost the same as in other places. Thank you, goddess. Klein thought gratefully as he touched his chest 4 times in a clockwise circle. He already planned to take this route when he came to the security company. Klein looked at Leonard and smiled warmly. Thanks, Leonard, I needed this. Leonard winked as he chuckled proudly. Of course. A walk in the fresh air is good for anyone, my good friend, and you. He said, pointing at Klein. You needed a long walk. Yes, I realize that. Klein said, feeling much more relaxed than he had in the last few days. A walk in the fresh air, huh? He thought as he looked up at the clear sky of the city. He had been so tense that he forgot to relax. Now he realized what a bad idea that was. If I had continued like this, I would have collapsed one of these days. Looking sideways at Leonard, Klein took a sip of his iced tea. It's good to have friends who take care of you. In the middle of his thoughts, and because he wasn't looking his path, Klein collided with 2 women and all 3 fell to the ground. Holding his head, Klein gave a small grunt as he looked down at his arm. He had been in the middle of drinking his tea when he crashed and the cup was still half full, his arm and jacket covered in iced tea. He didn't have time to grieve because he saw how Leonard was helping one of the women who fell to get up. The lady was wearing a long black dress with fair and smooth skin, brown hair like a waterfall, and brown eyes. She had the mature vibe of a woman in her 30s, but there was a remnant of innocence about her. Her eyes were crystal clear and she had a delicate look. This dainty appearance only made Klein feel worse. The other girl was already up and was glaring daggers at him, her dress stained with tea. She had on a rather large women's hat with a veil that prevented Klein from seeing her face. Ads by PubFuture. All he could see was the woman's black hair. How careless. Klein thought sheepishly as he hurriedly got up and helped Leonard. This woman also had tea stains on her dress. Klein was now red with embarrassment. He gave a deep bow. Please forgive me, ladies. I didn't see my way and I crashed into you, messing you up your beautiful dresses. Please don't ask for compensation money. Klein thought, terrified as he trembled slightly. Those dresses look expensive and Klein couldn't afford to pay dearly. Leonard looked at his friend and teammate and could only lament his clumsiness, but he couldn't help but feel that the taller woman was quite familiar. Seeing how Klein was trembling, the taller woman just laughed in amusement while waving her hand gracefully. No need, sir. We weren't looking where we were going either, so it's our fault as well. What? The shorter one tried to say something, but a look from the taller one made her shut up. Difficult relationship. Klein looked at this and couldn't help but comment in his mind. The tallest looked at her dress and sighed with relief. Thank goodness it's an old dress, no doubt I made the right decision in choosing this one before going out. She then looked at the duo in front of her and smiled warmly. Please excuse us, but we have to go home to change. Have a good day, gentlemen. With a slight nod, the woman walked off, followed closely by the young lady with the big hat. That was close, Klein thought in complete relief. If they had asked for money. Plap. His head received a hard slap and Klein gave Leonard a pained look. Leonard had an expression of shock. Do you have any idea who she was? He yelled in disbelief and Klein looked at him like he was crazy. She was Madame Sharon. Leonard yelled and Klein still didn't understand. Should he know that name? Leonard looked at his friend and seeing that he didn't understand what had happened, he could only say one thing. You're lucky you know that. Leonard decided to educate his friend on who Madame Sharon was. With every word that came out of Leonard's mouth, Klein's expression grew more and more horrified. Obviously, after calming down, Leonard did not stop bothering Klein with his little accident, and as soon as they returned to the company, he told everyone what happened. Klein could only take this in shame. On the afternoon of Sunday, Klein, who was locked in his room sleeping, woke up when he heard murmurs in his ears. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. Backland, abandoned ceramic factory. Sighing, Adrian counted the money again. This is the 3rd time you've done that. Why don't you send it already? Flora asked, annoyed seeing how the redhead was taking too long. Adrian smiled sadly as he shook his head. I don't know if you understand, since you're from a rich angel family like Jacob's, but I don't have that much money and it's hard for me to earn it. It's obvious that it's going to be hard for me to just throw it away, he said as he finished counting 9,000 pounds and tossing it into the bag. The money was not in the form of the normal Loan notes but in gold pounds. Thank you, Miss Casper and Mr. Zombie, Adrian thought with a smirk. Just 5 minutes ago, Klein, acting as the fool, had told him that the auction was about to start and that the hanged man needed the money. Goodbye, my love, by the monarch's blessing you shall come back to me as Sphinx's brain and the formula of conspirator. The redhead sadly said goodbye as he closed the bag and caressed it. It seems that you are saying goodbye to a sick family member before they cross over to the other side. Flora commented, quite amused at the image she had in front of her. Adrian sighed as he nodded. Yes, I admit it. I look pathetic, but what do you want me to do? It's the first time I've spent so much money, it's obvious that it will hurt a little. Yes, whatever makes you feel better, Princess Tomato. Flora teased. Haha, very funny, dear. Adrian rolled his eyes with a small smile because he, too, was somewhat amused at his own disgrace as he stood up and pulled a bell from his jacket. Whatever, I'm done with this. With that said and his spirituality past, Adrian shook his hand. The bell did not ring, but spirit waves appeared and rippled through the air. These waves travel from the normal world to the spirit world, ringing and calling out to Adrian's companion spirit. A few seconds later, the door of bones was formed and the tall Chicho came out of it. The giant woman looked down at Adrian, ready to learn why she had been summoned. Her eyes are like little pearls, Adrian thought as he extended the bag towards the giant. Chicho, I want you to deliver this to the island southeast of the Sonia Sea. It shouldn't be too hard for you to find it. This bag needs to be delivered to Alger Wilson, a man with blue hair and bronze skin. Adrian was sure that any concern regarding Chicho's location ability was pointless. Until now she always reached her destination no matter where it was. Although this is the farthest place she has gone since she became my messenger. Adrian thought curiously. How long would it take Chicho to get from Backland to the island in Sonia Sea? A timer would be nice. While Adrian thought about what to do to pass the time, Chicho just nodded curtly and raised her head. She tensely turned her head to the side. At the deepest part of her gray eyes, several bluish and transparent illusory doors opened looking for the target. Ads by PubFuture. Adrian watched what Chicho was doing with a bit of curiosity. He was unable to see the illusionary doors for a simple reason. He couldn't see them because Chicho was upright and the most Adrian could see was her chin. In just a few seconds, Chicho could see an island that was quite large and whose port was full of ships. A couple more doors opened. A three-masted sailing ship that looked quite old. The door of the captain's cabin. And finally, a man with blue hair and tanned skin. This man was sitting in front of a table, looking at a very ancient map with a serious and thoughtful face. Chicho just blinked and the doors closed and her gray eyes returned to normal. Lowering her head, she nodded curtly, opened her mouth, and spoke in a heavily accented Elvish. It will not be a problem. Then she extended her hand. Yes, little Willy Wonka, here's your salary, thought Adrian with a smile as he pulled a special chocolate bar from his waistcoat. Here it is, Chicho. I don't want you to get bored of peanuts, so I bought you a new flavor. I hope you like it. Chicho tilted her head slightly, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. She really turns into a giant little girl when chocolate is shown. The corners of Adrian's mouth twitched, but he didn't say anything. He just passed the bar to Chicho, who looked at it curiously. She squinted, trying to read the words on the chocolate wrapper. White chocolate with caramel. Looking down, Chicho slightly tilted her head, not understanding. Adrian smiled calmly and pointed at the chocolate bar with his finger. It's a white chocolate bar with caramel filling. It's been on the market for a few days now and it's a hit with everyone. Before he continued explaining, the redhead stopped when he saw Chicho's face. He could see how she was even more confused, and it seemed that at any moment several would appear around her head. Quote. Cough cough. Pretending to cough to hide the blush on his cheeks, Adrian got to the point. What I mean is that it's some kind of special edition. I hope you like it. Is also very expensive. He added mentally, still bitter at the price of the bar. £3 for a chocolate bar? Fuck them. The redhead thought, annoyed at such a brutal scam. Ads by PubFuture. If the poor god knew this, he'd have a stroke. Adrian thought of a certain fool and suddenly felt better. That mental image was quite funny. While Adrian was thinking about the suffering of a certain seer, Chicho was looking at the bar in her hands with intense eyes. After thinking for a few seconds, she unwrapped the chocolate and looked at it quite curiously while licking her lips, which suddenly felt dry. The chocolate bar was a rectangular one divided into several rows and cut into triangles. It was of a juicy milky color and it had several brown spots and dots all over its body. Not being able to avoid it, Chicho licked her lips again. That done, she took an experimental bite, and tasting it, her eyes lit up. She controlled herself and began to eat more slowly, trying to savor the bar more. And I lost her. Adrian thought flatly as he watched Chicho eat. Looks like she has a new favorite flavor now. Sorry Chicho, but I'll only give you that bar on special occasions. He didn't want to dry himself out by buying chocolate bars for his cocoa-addicted messenger. Maybe I should have bought a small one to try it. Maybe another day. Sighing slightly, Adrian looked at Chicho seriously. When you deliver the bag, you don't need to talk to Alger if he doesn't see you, but if that's the case, don't call him by his name and don't tell him mine either, just tell him it's from Chariot. Chicho just nodded without saying anything, her mouth too busy with the chocolate to respond. She only held the bag in one hand and the chocolate in the other and stepped into the door of bones. When her entire body entered, the door fell apart and it disappeared without a trace. Looking at the place where the bone gate was, Adrian said nothing. The redhead just sat on the chair in his room and formed several small fireballs and began to do tricks with them. Now it was his turn to wait. The rest was in the hands of Alger. Reading and reviewing the map for the 10th and something time, Alger sighed in annoyance as he ran a hand through his blue hair. This is another fake, he thought as he grabbed the map and crumpled it into a ball and put it in his pocket to throw away later. He could just throw the map out of his cabin window into the sea, but he would never do that. His teaching in the Church of the Lord of Storms and his respect for the sea prevented him. Shaking his head, he looked at the clock on his desk, and seeing the time he frowned. 5:45 p.m. It's been 5 minutes since I notified Chariot that the auction is not far from starting. If the courier does not appear before 7:30 p.m., then it will be impossible to get what he asked for. The Sphinx's brain will disappear faster than bodies in the sea if Chariot's messenger didn't hurry. Right at that moment, Alger's pupils shrank and a deep chill ran up his spine. He wasn't immediately alarmed, he calmly activated his spirit vision and watched as a giant bone gate began to form in front of him. At all times he remained calm, his breathing normal and his eyes sharp, ready for anything unexpected. Alger couldn't help but feel a little curious. What would the messenger of the annoying and mysterious member of the Church of the God of Knowledge and Knowledge look like? The answer didn't take too long to appear when the skull of a large bird was inserted into the middle of this bone door. When this curious skull was inserted into the door, it swung open, revealing a dark and turbulent space. Out of this black space came something that could only be described as a giant woman. Alger's eyes widened slightly at this. From what he knew, a messenger in human form was a very rare thing. Chariot has many more secrets than I thought. Alger thought seriously. From being a member who did not appear in any church document, possessing advanced knowledge, and having a messenger in human form. The level that Chariot had to be very high. This giant woman only looked at him with serene gray eyes, showing no other emotion. Alger noticed how there was a brown stain next to her lip. He could also smell the very faint smell of chocolate. Curious. He did not point this out so as not to offend the giant. He did not know the strength of the messenger or if she was short-tempered, so he would not risk offending her. The giant only put her hand in the turbulent space that was still open and took out a long bag that she extended to Alger. From Chariot, Elvish. Alger immediately recognized the language, but not wanting to disturb the messenger, he nodded and took the bag. The giant woman just turned around and entered the door of bones, which fell and disappeared after she entered. A spirit in human form and capable of communication. Thinking of that, he immediately realized a problem that caused him to curse under his breath. Shit. She saw my face. If Chariot's messenger was able to communicate, that meant she could tell Chariot what he looked like. This caused an uncomfortable feeling to fill his stomach. I was careless, the blue-haired man mumbled before sighing, trying to calm down. Chariot may now know who I am, but he wouldn't dare attack me after all. We are both under the gaze of Mr. Fool. He wouldn't allow that. The great existence that was most likely a god would not allow one member to attack another. With this realization, any fear or insecurity he might have felt vanished as if it were never there. Looking down at the bag in his hand, Alger sighed, and placing it on the table, he opened it. A golden glow was reflected in his eyes, and this made the corners of his lip quiver. Clucking, he grabbed his promised share of 800 pounds from the bag and set aside the rest. Leaving Blue Avenger, Alger did not meet any of his men as they had gone to enjoy the special services of the island. Ads by PubFuture. Already used to this, he simply went to where the auction was to take place. As he walked, the quick review what he was looking to get. The Sphinx's brain and the conspirator and melee scholar formula for chariot, and pages from the Emperor Rassel's diary for Mr. Fool. A week without pages is enough. I don't want Mr. Fool to think I'm not trying to fulfill his errand. Alger thought heavily as he clenched his fists. Mr. Fool had said that it was not always necessary to turn in a page from the diary, but that did not reassure Alger. If I consistently fail to deliver a page, what will Mr. Fool think of me? Maybe if I don't give him any for a long time, I'll be expelled from the Tarot Club. That was something Alger didn't want at all. After walking for a while, Alger arrived at the auction site. In front of him was the entrance to a cave that was illuminated by several lamps, and this was guarded by a considerable number of men. Keeping his cool, Alger walked to the entrance, and one of the men standing there stood in his way. What do you want? This is a private zone. If you don't have any business, get out. The man said in a deep and strong voice. This man was a man as tall as Alger. He had black eyes and black hair. This is not normal, Alger thought seriously. Normally they would just look at him but never talk to him or cut him off. Something happened. Alger concluded but remained calm. I'm here for the special function. Alger said. The function is somewhat unique and strict. If you are not more specific, I will not know what you are talking about, the man said seriously as he flexed his arms, making his muscles swell. Alger remained relaxed and undaunted by this. Being now sequence 7, it takes a lot more than that to intimidate him. I'm here to attend the auction hosted by the king. Alger got right to the point, causing the black eyes of the man in front of him to sharpen. The man looked at him in silence for a few seconds before relaxing his gaze and moving out of the way. You're just in time, 20 more minutes, and the auction would have started, the man said mockingly. To Alger, this low level of mockery was nothing, so he ignored this and only advanced into the cave. The tunnel to the cave was quite large. You didn't need to look closely at the walls to know that it was not a natural formation. After walking for a while, Alger finally arrived at the auction. A huge open space that could easily fit a small neighborhood. Pirates or lone beyonders walked the streets. There were several small stalls selling low-level charms or ritual materials or the like. Things that weren't worth putting up for auction. Speaking of the auction, looking straight ahead, at the end of the cave was a large theater. The red curtains were closed, signaling that the show had not started yet. There were a lot of seats around this theater, easily more than 100 people could sit there. Ads by PubFuture. Some seats were already occupied by some people. What was most surprising was the order that there was. Many pirates who hated each other sat just a few meters away but did not attack each other, they just sat ignoring each other's presence. And all this was due to one reason. Or rather a person. Swallowing, Alger wiped the sweat from his brow and chose a seat not too far from the theater to sit down. He subconsciously lowered his head slightly and waited for the auction to start. I can't believe this. His ear caught a conversation and Alger, seeing an opportunity, spied. Tell me, who does that bitch think she is? Thinking she can become an admiral? How ridiculous. A man growled in annoyance and his surrounding men nodded. Another man next to him snorted loudly and added. As desperate as she is, I wouldn't be surprised if she offers to sleep with someone to join her crew. A wave of laughter rang out and Alger just inwardly shook his head at that. Then at that moment, the previous man said something that caught his attention. With Captain Admiral Pale in the water, that chick doesn't stand a chance. Captain Pale. Alger thought, confused and stunned. It was the first time he heard that name. Trying to make sense, he thought of various possibilities. Did a new admiral appear? That is, I was in the ocean for 8 days, I couldn't have missed the birth of a new admiral. But it makes the most sense. But why would there suddenly be guards? Someone like him doesn't need them, so is there another reason? Does this Captain Pale have an investor that makes someone like him take precautions? Alger thought heavily as he frowned. What's going on? As he thought about that, the seats around him began to fill up, and quickly all of them were filled, although there was also a circle of people standing around waiting for the auction to start. At that moment, the ringing of bells filled the cave and the red curtain was parted, revealing a thin man in a colorful suit and red hat with a wide smile on his white face. Welcome everyone. Sorry for the delay and the new security, things have been hectic lately, but don't worry. Security is everything, so nothing will happen to you inside this cave. He said cheerfully with a laugh, but no one laughed. The man didn't feel bad about this, He just chuckled and added darkly. But of course, you'll be by yourselves when you leave the island. The weakest trembled at the presenter's dark voice, and this caused him to laugh. Leaving that aside, we must thank whoever makes this auction possible. The presenter moved and pointed to a tall person sitting on a throne at the back of the stage. He had a squarish face with slight wrinkles. The wrinkles on his face looked hardened and filled with magnificence. He had a short black mustache beneath his chin, and his black eyes swirled with a red glow. He wore a tall pointed crown and a gorgeous black robe with silver fringes. Give a round of applause to the King of the Seven Seas, Nast Solomon. Immediately, a wave of applause was followed by standing ovations for the king. Alger also clapped his hands and kept his gaze lowered, unable to look beyond the shadow Nast cast. Put the games aside and start the auction. Nast said calmly, but his voice carried an enormous authority that made the presenter and those present tremble slightly. Why yes, sir, the presenter said with his smile broken. Turning to the audience, his smile reappeared as if nothing happened, and he continued with his arms outstretched in the air. Let the auction begin. Let's sail. ... Closing his cabin door, Alger blew out a soft sigh as he walked to his chair and sat down. Placing the container, which was the same size as his head, on the table, Alger looked at it with a complicated look. He opened a drawer and from it took out a bottle and a mug. Uncorking the bottle with a loud pop, Alger poured the brown liquid into his mug. Recorking the bottle, he set it down on the table and grabbing his mug he took a deep drink. Feeling the rum go down his throat, Alger put his cup down and sighed again. He then took out a yellowish piece of paper from his pocket and looked at it. Malay Scholar Potion Formula. He reread the formula on the paper a few more times before placing it on top of the container. After that, he also took out from his pocket several yellowish papers with strange symbols on them. Counting everything again, Alger heaved a pleased sigh and couldn't help but smile. 20 pages. I'm sure Mr. Fool will be quite pleased by this. Looking down at the container, the smile on Alger's face disappeared and was replaced by a flat expression. Chariot just asked if I could get the formula for conspirator. It's not my fault it wasn't at the auction, besides I got one of the formulas he wanted, so he can't claim anything from me. Alger thought unimportantly as he stuffed the diary pages into his pocket. Later he would keep them in a more suitable place, now he had to deliver this to Chariot. Grabbing the container and the paper with the formula, Alger placed them in front of an altar that he had used earlier to summon Chariot's messenger. Lighting the single candle on the altar, Alger prayed. I, he said in ancient Hermes. I summon on my name, he changed to Hermes. The special spirit that wanders through the upper realm. The trustworthy spirit who is friendly to humans. The companion spirit of Chariot. As soon as he finished the last line, he felt how the temperature in the room decreased. ... Thanks again, Chicho, Adrian said with a small smile as he handed the giant a chocolate bar. The woman just nodded roughly as she grabbed the bar. Chicho looked at the bar for a few seconds and then looked at the redhead carefully. Hey, don't look at me like that, I can't always give you the chocolate. That would be spoiling you. Adrian thought with the corners of his mouth quivering slightly. That chocolate is quite special. If I gave it to you every time you deliver a letter you would get bored of it, and you don't want that, right Chicho? Adrian defended himself with his sly tongue, then added with a questioning tone. You don't want that delicious chocolate to lose its magic, do you? Chicho looked at him attentively with her gray eyes, deep in thought. After a few seconds, she nodded, feeling that what the redhead was saying made sense. Adrian's smile grew slightly at this, but he controlled himself and nodded. That would be all, Chicho. If I need your help again I will call on you. Ads by PubFuture. Chicho nodded slightly, and with calm movements, she unwrapped the chocolate and began to eat it while she entered the Door of Bones. When the Door of Bones disintegrated, Flora took the opportunity to speak, her tone amused and full of curiosity. Did you see the chocolate stain on her face? How long do you think it will take her to realize it's there? Not much, maybe when she gets to wherever her house is she'll find out. Although I hope she will not be upset that I didn't tell her it was there. Adrian said, scratching his head, not sure if it was a good idea or not. He had used a lot of iron will not to point out the stain and provoke his messenger a little. Flora snorted and Adrian could imagine the woman rolling her eyes as she did so. Come on, at least give me a number. I say 2 days. Adrian smiled as he shook his head. Well, I say 15 minutes or maybe 20. It depends if she has a mirror in her house or some friendly spirit tells her about her problem. That's a good point. Flora murmured under her breath in agreement. 1 hour. Adrian chuckled at this before looking at the container on the table next to the yellowed paper. Next to these was the same bag he had sent, only much smaller. There must be the change, he thought, feeling a small pain in his chest. The bag was still a bit big, and this meant that Alger hadn't been able to get everything he asked for. Walking over to the table and grabbing the paper, he opened it and read it. Melee Scholar Potion Formula. Main ingredients. Grounded knuckles of the magenta lizard. The 4 legs of the jumping horned toad. Supplementary ingredients. 70 milliliters of purified water. * 15 grams of oxidized iron. * 10 small drops of the saliva of the jumping horned toad. 5 grams of zinc. Seeing that the note ended there, Adrian sighed softly before putting the note in his pocket. At least I kept what I promised to Charlotte, the redhead muttered, but he couldn't help but feel disappointed. Now I only have the meeting of the Hermits of Fate in Bakerland, the redhead thought heavily as he looked at the worn wall of the office. If the Hermits of Fate failed, he would have to hunt down Bakerland to obtain the formula. Sighing slightly, he looked at the container on the table and an idea floated into his mind. I can always make advance by consuming the main ingredients, he muttered, considering the idea for a moment. I will never allow it. Flora screamed so loudly that it stunned Adrian for a moment. What the hell, Flora? The redhead groaned, holding his head. Ads by PubFuture. Flora snarled angrily and snapped. Do you want to kill yourself? If you consume the main ingredients without the supplementary ones, the most likely case is that you will die or lose control. Adrian could hear the concern in Flora's tone and sighed a little embarrassed. Sorry about that, Flora, it was just a momentary idea, nothing more. You know how careful I am, and you know that I would never try something as crazy as that, the redhead defended himself. You better be, Adrian. Flora grunted and then fell silent, but Adrian could hear her muttering things under her breath. Stupid tomato head, who do you think you are to even think of that as an option? You fucking asshole, scaring me like that. Now I feel kind of bad. Adrian thought as he scratched his head. Flora's reaction made sense since his idea was practically a Russian roulette with a pump shotgun. Consuming the main ingredients without the supplementary ingredients would almost certainly cause him to lose control or die. Either because of the remaining consciousness in the ingredients that weren't suppressed or because of the damage it would do to him. There were many possible ways to die and none was painless. Sighing, Adrian decided to speak to Flora later to apologize and turned his attention back to the container. Placing his hand on the lid and lifting it, breaking the wall of spirituality it had, he was able to see the Sphinx's brain. In a jar that a puppy could easily dig into, floating in a greenish liquid was a large purple brain. This brain didn't look normal. It had multiple bumps all over it and black veins that seemed to throb every second as if it was still alive. A desire to consume this brain slightly dazed the redhead, who shook his head as he closed the container. Releasing a small sigh, he gently patted the container. You were hard to get, but now you're mine. Grabbing the container, after reapplying the wall of spirituality, Adrian carefully placed it on the altar he had prepared earlier. Kneeling before it, Adrian clasped his hands, and bowing his head, he prayed. The scarlet monarch that burns depravity. Monday, 3 p.m. Above the gray fog, in the great hall of the giants, 2 crimson flashes and a torrent of crimson flames appeared. Appearing in her seat, Audrey turned happily to greet the figure covered in a gray fog, as was almost custom, but something new stopped her. Alger also noticed this something. Adrian also noticed it, and this caused a sharp smile to grow on his face. Looks like my worries were in vain. Before anyone could say or do anything, Mr. Fool's voice echoed through the divine hall. This is our new member code name. Klein took about 2 seconds to give a little drama. Son, First of all, I apologize for disappearing for almost a week and not posting any trails. The exams came back stronger than ever and they left me devastated. I barely had energy for anything and I barely finished them on Friday. I took the weekend to rest. The chapters are back and I really apologize for what I did, and also forgive me for worrying you. New member. Audrey thought in shock, that immediately turned to joy. She quickly turned to look at the aforementioned. It was difficult to see the more specific details of the sun thanks to the gray fog, but Audrey could still see some. The sun has brownish yellow hair and wore a unique black tight suit that was different from the clothing of countries in the northern continent. What curious clothes. Maybe sun is from Fasak. Audrey thought excitedly, trying to figure out the origin of the sun. She was very excited to see the growth of the Tarot Club. She felt like a protagonist. Alger creased his brows, a bit annoyed that the fool dragged in a new member so suddenly. He should have mentioned it to us at least. But a great figure like Mr. Fool shouldn't care about our feelings. He thought in exasperation before giving a simple greeting to Justice, Chariot, and Sun. Adrian, for his part, just gave a simple greeting to the rest and returned his attention to the ceiling but actually looked at Sun out of the corner of his eye. Something's weird. Isn't it too early for Sun to join? If I remember correctly, he joined in the middle of August, that is, a week later. The redhead thought seriously as he looked at the young Sun. He held back a sigh as he then rested his cheek in his palm. It seems that things are happening faster than I expected. Audrey, after analyzing Sun and coming to the conclusion that he was someone young and that he gave the air of a lone wolf, left her spectator state and looked at the Fool. Mr. Fool, I have collected another 2 pages from Emperor Rassel's diary. She said with joy. It really was 3 pages, but I only managed to memorize 2. The symbols were too complicated and too difficult to memorize. Audrey added, in her heart a little embarrassed. New pages? Klein's heart gladdened. He smiled and asked. Miss Justice, what do you need? Please, something easy. Klein added in his heart. He wasn't worried in the least that someone like Justice would ask for money, she showed she had plenty of it. He was worried that she would ask for something that he could not give. Audrey's eyes lit up with excitement, but she responded in a reserved manner. I would like to know, if possible, the name of the following telepathist sequence. Hey girl, aren't you in a hurry? Just a few weeks ago you got the formula for your sequence 8 and now you want to know the name of the next sequence. Klein began to consider what to answer. He couldn't tell Justice the name of the next sequence because he didn't know it, but if he did, he wasn't sure he would tell her. Thanks to someone, Klein didn't have to worry about responding. Telepathist. Like the telepathist that is followed by the psychoanalyst. The Sun interrupted. Audrey looked towards him puzzledly. You know of it. At the same time, she saw a problem through her spectator instinct. The Sun had used the old title psychoanalyst instead of the modern title, psychiatrist. This guy is a little weird. Audrey examined Sun's every move. What did I tell you before? Don't talk carelessly. Klein wanted to slap his face with all his might. He used the corner of his eye and saw how what Sun had said had caught not only Justice's attention but Chariot's attention. The strongest member of the Tarot Club was looking directly at Sun. Klein wanted to slap Sun on the head for drawing the attention of who he shouldn't have. Great, as soon as Sun arrives he's going to be bullied. Klein lamented for the young man, but he couldn't do anything to help him. He could only pray that he wouldn't blurt out anything that would draw Chariot's attention even more. Now I just wonder how long it will take Chariot to discover the origin of the Sun. Maybe in the next Tarot Club or the one after that. It would be ridiculous for Chariot to conclude today that Sun is from the forgotten land of the gods, right? Remembering what had happened at the first Tarot Club, Klein bit the inside of his cheek. Right, you don't know how to shut your mouth, do you? Adrian thought with an amused smile as he looked at Sun. Ads by PubFuture. Not knowing that he was already dancing on the wolf's tongue with an apple in his mouth and bathed in sauce. Sun, or as he was better known, Derek Berg, responded seriously. I can get you the formula. Then, he felt guilty because he couldn't provide it right away. He tried to explain himself. It is a sequence that comes from the dragon race. And our city of Silver was once ruled by the giant king imperial household. As you know, giants and dragons are sworn enemies. Hence, Silver City of Silver has all sequences 9, 8, and 7. I have ways to get them. This kid, Klein wailed deeper and was barely able to stop himself from slapping himself across the face. The boy had walked in that by himself. Now all that remained was to wait for the show. He could have stopped Sun at any time if he wanted to, he just had to stop translating and the rest of the Tarot Club wouldn't have understood him at all. But Klein took another path. He felt this would make his image as a great existence stronger and further remove any doubts Chariot might have. So he just sat and listened to everything with a smile without saying anything. I can also get more information without having to ask and ruin my image. So the origins of the spectator sequence come from the dragon race. That explains the dragon on the back of Justice's seat. Giant King, Dragon Race, City of Silver. Audrey was confused. She first took a look at the hanged man opposite her, but she could tell he was just as shocked and confused by his body language. She then turned and saw how Chariot simply had his cheek resting on his palm as he looked at Sun with a smile that was very familiar to her. Looks like Chariot knows something. Audrey only allowed herself to look at the man for 3 seconds before looking away. Not wanting to suffer the wrath of that smile, she simply glanced sideways at the seat of honor at the top of the bronze table. The fool watched everything that happened with a smile. The figure covered by grayish-white fog showed no shock, no thought, no curiosity, and no doubt. He knows. He knew all this. Audrey and Alger came to the same conclusion. Hee hee. Already familiar with the laughter, Audrey and Alger turned to look at the smiling chariot. Derek, for his part, looked somewhat confused at the laughing man, not understanding why he suddenly laughed. Here it comes. Klein thought heavily as he watched Chariot cover his mouth with his right hand. At least maybe I can get more information on the forgotten land of the gods through Sun's suffering. Klein tried to see the bright side of what was about to happen. Lowering his hand, Adrian looked at the Tarot Club members with a small smile. Oh, excuse my manners, it's just that what Sun said is quite amusing to me. Derek frowned and looked somewhat annoyed at the man. What do you think is funny, Mr. Chariot? I didn't tell any jokes. Ha ha ha, oh sweet summer child, I think you misunderstood me. Adrian said, amused. Annoying and embarrassing Derek a bit. Then explain please. Derek said, a little upset. Adrian smiled some more. You see, little son, it's not like you told a funny joke, it's just that you revealed where you're from without letting me guess for myself. Huh. Derek was confused and a little stunned. It's a little game of mine, in short, it keeps me busy. Adrian explained shortly but then continued with a sharp smile. But at least where you come from is very interesting, you know. Before Derek could question what he mean by that, Adrian continued. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's 2,583 years in the dark, right? Having only lightning to light up your day must be a horrible thing, knowing that if you stay in the dark you'll disappear never to be seen again, and the monster that crawls out of the dark ready to devour. He said with a heavy tone and then added with a small smile. It must be very hard living like that, right? If you can even call that living. Audrey and Alger couldn't help but be stunned. Lightning to light up the day. Disappear in the dark. Monsters. What the hell was Chariot talking about? What he described seemed like a nightmare. They both turned to see Sun. What kind of place is where he lived? Ads by PubFuture. Klein barely held back a sigh. Of course, he would know. Derek felt offended but also a little confused. The way Chariot had said it was not how someone from the City of Silver would have phrased it. It was as if the man had described a place he read about. Derek looked at the man and noted his red hair. While there were a few people with red hair in the City of Silver, none of them had such a bright color. I would remember seeing someone with that hair, but I've never seen him. Derek thought seriously as an idea struck him. Could it be possible that he is from another surviving city? Is the City of Silver not alone? Hope burned in his heart and he wanted to ask very badly but held back in the end. This is the hope of the City of Silver. I have to act carefully, I can't jump to conclusions. Mr. Chariot, you do not appear to be a part of the City of Silver. What city-state are you from? Derek asked. Adrian smiled. I'm not from any city-state, little son. He pointed at Justice and the Hanged Man. Actually, none of us here are. Let me ask you a question. If we're not from, where are you from? Where do you think we are from? Derek was a little stunned and very confused. If none of the members were from the City of Silver, where else could they be from? Making a wild guess, he looked uncomfortably at the members and asked sheepishly. Are you from another planet? Ha 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 ha. Seeing poor Derek's confusion, Adrian laughed and shook his head. We are all from the same planet, little son, but in some ways we are different. Seeing that Derek was still confused, Adrian smiled and explained. While your skies are full of black clouds and thunder, ours are blue and with the sun illuminating us. While your darkness will devour you if you stay in it too long, ours does nothing. You fight monsters to survive, we don't have to ever worry about that. Adrian leaned back in his seat and inclined his head with a smile. With everything I've said by now you should know where we're from. Derek began to tremble and looked at the group in astonishment. If what Chariot said was true, there was only one place they could be from. You are from the world of light. Adrian smiled and winked mischievously. Bingo. The world of light. Derek lowered his head and continued to tremble, but not with anger or annoyance but with joy. Extreme joy. Not everyone was struck by calamity. There is hope. Derek felt his blood burn, but he bit his lip to keep from reacting. He didn't want to offend the godlike fool. After more than 2,000 years the City of Silver had finally gotten an answer and a new hope. He couldn't afford to lose it because he reacted like a little child. Audrey, seeing how Sun was shaking, misinterpreted his extreme joy with discomfort. Unable to help but empathize with the young man, she tried to help out a bit by attracting Chariot's attention. Excuse me, Mr. Chariot. You seem very familiar with the sun's place of origin. Would it be possible for you to tell us a bit more about it? Klein looked at Justice with emotion and internally sighed happily. Having someone like her helped a lot. Adrian turned to look at Justice and tilting his head slightly to the side, he smiled. Of course, Miss Justice. Also, don't worry, this one is in the house. Pointing his hand at the trembling son, Adrian's smile grew. Our newest member is from the Forsaken Land of the Gods. Forsaken Land of the Gods. Due to her young age in the Beyonder world, Audrey was unable to control herself and blurted out the name in shock. She looked at Son in complete shock. Alger, much more mature than Justice, was able to control himself better, but he couldn't help but look at Son in a daze. The Forsaken Land of the Gods is real. It wasn't just a legend. And Son comes from there. Alger looked sideways at the figure covered in gray fog sitting in the seat of honor and saw how he was sitting relaxed looking at everything as if nothing disturbed or surprised him, as if he already knew everything. Alger immediately lowered his head and began to tremble slightly. The 7 churches have searched for the location of the Forgotten Land of the Gods for a long time without any results, but Mr. Fool just introduced us to a member of that land like nothing. If the fool could do that, that meant he knew where the Forsaken Land of the Gods was. Couldn't you hold back a bit? Son may look like a big man, but he's still a teenager. Klein mentally complained about Chariot's bullying but still made no move to interfere. And that was because he got a lot of benefits from letting Chariot talk. Feeling the looks he was receiving from Justice and the Hanged Man, Klein internally thanked the bully. My image became bigger and more mysterious. Having someone like Chariot can be dangerous, but it brings many benefits. Klein thought cheerfully while maintaining his smile. Adrian wasn't done yet. The redhead turned to look at the fool and smiled at the same time that he placed a hand on his right chest and made a small bow. Your power is much greater than I could have ever thought possible, Mr. Fool. The feat you did in bringing little Son here has to be praised and prayed for. It can only be described as a miracle among miracles. Adrian's tone was one of reverence and faith, as if he had seen a divine feat and he wanted to applaud and praise it. Klein felt the tips of his ears turn red and a whirlpool of embarrassment rose in his stomach. Shut up. I didn't know that Chariot could be so flattering and that it felt so weird to receive that side of him. I don't know why, but it feels bad. Klein thought, full of embarrassment. He wanted to sink into his seat. Without moving, he looked at Justice and Hanged Man and saw how they were now looking at him in amazement and astonishment. Klein now wanted more than anything to return to his body and lock himself in his room. So much admiration. If they knew that I'm nothing more than a small sequence 9, how would they react? Or rather, how would Chariot react? The mere thought of this man finding out the truth sent a chill up his spine. At least that won't happen. It seems that bringing Son here is something much bigger than I thought. If Chariot reacts like this, that's good. This means that his idea of who I am has been strengthened. Who would think that a small sequence 9 would take someone out of a land of legends just to attend a small club? Putting his thoughts and embarrassment aside, Klein smiled and said calmly. It was something simple. Something simple. Alger trembled slightly at the fool's calm tone. He had achieved something that not even the 7 churches achieved, and he said it was simple. Mr. Fool is much more powerful than I thought. Well, he has to be to pull off something Chariot described as a miracle. Audrey thought with excitement and a bit of discomfort. But she quickly shook off her discomfort, which was transformed into joy. That means our tarot club is much stronger than I thought. Something simple like getting someone off a land blocked by the death of a religious fanatic. Yes, of course, Klein. Your bullshitting ability is undoubtedly a divine power in itself. Not even the gods would be saved from your power. Adrian thought flatly as he rolled his eyes. While insulting another of Klein's special abilities, the redhead added, I have another 2 pages from the diary of the Emperor Russell, Mr. Fool. Reacting and coming out of his shock, Alger looked at the fool and said, Ads by PubFuture. I have managed to obtain a collection of 20 pages of the diary of the Emperor Russell, Mr. Fool. Unfortunately, I am only able to memorize 2 at a time. I hope this is not a bother. Klein, still embarrassed, just nodded but couldn't help but feel quite pleased. 20 pages. I can't wait to read them. Klein thought with a smile as he said. Don't worry, Mr. Hanged Man, I understand that it is difficult to write the symbols left by the Emperor. I especially understand because his handwriting is horrible and worse than a doctor's. Klein added mentally. He still remembered the original pages that old Neil had shown him. Looking at both men, he asked. Tell me, gentlemen, what do you need? Nothing for now, Mr. Fool. I'd like to convert them into contribution points. Adrian said calmly. Alger thought for a few moments before shaking his head. Same with me, Mr. Fool. Klein nodded nonchalantly and held back a sigh of relief, but at the same time, he wanted to laugh in defeat. At this rate, my debt will only grow and grow. Klein thought heavily as he brought out the goatskin parchment and red fountain pen in front of the original trio. After a few minutes, 6 pages appeared in his hands and Klein began to read. Adrian, Alger, and Audrey fell silent, waiting patiently for the fool to finish reading. Derek looked around, still shaken but confused. Why were they silent? Derek really wanted to say something, but he stopped himself and decided to wait for this silence to be broken by someone else. Little son is still quite a respectful guy. He's a good kid, Adrian thought calmly as he caught sight of the young man out of the corner of his eye before looking up at the ceiling and gazing up at the crimson stars. It seems that son has better self-control than I thought. He's finally doing what I told him. Klein, seeing that nothing had happened contrary to what he expected, returned his attention to the pages of the diary. He decided to start with the Justice and Hanged Man pages because they were the most full. November 3rd. Matilda is 3 months pregnant. November 8th. Archbishop Van Espen sought my help. What could I do for an archbishop? November 9th. It turns out that there is a secret hidden in the sequence pathways. Archbishop Espen told me that after becoming a sequence 5 Beyander, the rest of the sequence can be replaced with sequences of the same level from 1 or 2 other pathways. In other words, start from mid-sequence to high sequence. Mystery Prior and Savon can be interchanged starting with sequence 4. Unfortunately, this is limited to 1 or 2 pathways. If you use the wrong pathway, semi-insanity is the mildest outcome. It turns out that you can replace the pathway after sequence 5. But this is totally different to what the Nighthawks told me. Wasn't it a fact that you couldn't change your pathway when you chose one? It turns out that there are exceptions to this rule. Ads by PubFuture. Klein thought as he read the pages of the diary, his pupils contracting. He looked down and saw that the date was wrong. Although the 2 pages were connected, the chronological order was wrong because the dates belonged to 2 different periods. This could be a mistake by whoever copied the page. April 9th. The relationship between the Church of the Lord of Storms, the Eternal Blazing Sun Church, and the Church of the God of Knowledge and Wisdom is poor. Each sees the other as an enemy and neither will hesitate to kill the other. April 13th. I participated in an ancient gathering organization. I never thought they would also be a part of it. It sure is scary. They have in their hands the second blasphemy slate. Hee. Maybe the day will come when I make my own blasphemy slate, one unique to me. No, it will be a set of them, with each one hiding an ultimate secret. Holy fuck Russell, why didn't you write down the name of this ancient organization? Klein cursed the Emperor with all his might for leaving him wanting to know. But he quickly realized a problem. Why didn't he write the name of that ancient organization in Chinese? There is a reason for that. Maybe Russell didn't even dare to write it in Chinese. Klein looked at the diary page, a bit uneasy and puzzled. For someone like Russell to not even dare to write it, there must be a very good reason. Inwardly shaking his head, Klein began to read the pages handed out by the Hanged Man. December 19th. To whoever is reading this, I want you to know that I finally did it. I finally got past the first floor. I can't fucking believe I'm saying this, but I'm an idiot. The most idiot of all. How did I not notice it at first if it was right before my eyes? It's worse since my friend from work when I was still in my world was a fan and always told me stories about it. For fuck's sake, I even went to see the Christmas special with him when it came out in December 2014. Oh, I really miss that ugly and fat bastard. He made the best carrot cake I ever ate. I'm getting off topic, sorry. You don't know how much I would like to tell you about what I faced, but I can't. The tower has a kind of contract that prevents me from telling my experiences in it or about the enemies there. The only thing I can do is give you very small clues, but I doubt that they will be enough for you to discover what I mean. I'm getting off topic again. Forgive me, but I'm shaking and I want to cry. I've already stained this page several times and I had to rewrite it. But who can blame me? To make it short, turns out I'm not alone. Whoever created this tower is from my world. Our world. Another transmigrator. Klein's pupils narrowed and his breathing stopped. Is it possible that it is another fellow from the homeland? No. The possibility of them being Chinese is ridiculous. And if so, what would that say about the reason why I transmigrated? Did the responsible for that have some strange tastes? Quickly, Klein continued reading the rest of the pages given by the Hanged Man. This is something I expected to happen but never imagined it this way. I thought it would be the other way around. With me as the senior and a future transmigrator as my junior. In the end, I turned out to be the junior. That's kind of annoying, but I'm not complaining. I would only be complaining if it turns out that this mysterious senior was younger than me when he came to this world. Calling a junior my senior would be humiliating. Although with how old I imagine this tower is, I think it's fair to call them senior. I wonder if they are a man or a woman. Hee. If they are a woman, I bet she is very beautiful. Shameless bastard. Klein just stared blankly at this sentence, having no idea what to think or say. He just continued reading. But there is something that bothers me the more I think about it. I'm 100% sure a transmigrator created this tower. I bet my soul on it. What confuses me is, how is it that there is no more evidence of their existence other than the tower? Did something happen in the past that erased this transmigrator from history? Or maybe, did someone delete the existence of this transmigrator on purpose? Whatever the answer is, I can feel that the truth is much worse than I can ever imagine. What? His body froze, but he quickly recovered and maintained his unfathomable image as if nothing had happened. Klein contained a shaky breath and narrowed his eyes slightly. There was another transmigrator before Russell and they created something called the tower. What is this tower, and how is Emperor Russell so sure that they are a transmigrator? Klein bit his tongue a bit. There must be more pages before this one that talks a little more about this tower. Klein wanted to click his tongue in annoyance. Whatever this tower is, what Russell saw made him sure that there is another transmigrator before him. Klein narrowed his eyes. Russell is right. How is it possible that he or she hasn't left their mark on the world like the Emperor did? Perhaps they didn't have the opportunity, or it was impossible for them, or they were really erased by someone else. What the Emperor was proposing was very dark and gave rise to many dangerous possibilities. But there was something Klein noticed again that made him uncomfortable. This was a problem that Klein realized as soon as he found out that the Emperor was a transmigrator. Ads by PubFuture. The difference between the time he appeared and the Emperor was more than 100 years. And this made him think a bit more. What said that 100 years was the limit and could not be more? Perhaps this unknown senior, as Russell called them, appeared 300, 500, or even 1,000 years in the past. If the difference between him and the Emperor was already difficult, the difference between the two of them and this senior was ridiculous. What is the meaning of such time lapses? Who were they? Are they still alive? The Beyonders have a longer lifespan than a normal person, but Klein didn't know if they had such longevity to live more than 1,000 years. If this transmigrator created this tower, that means they were very strong. Maybe if it's possible they'll still be alive. Klein thought heavily before switching to Chariot's pages. It is better not to have empty hopes. Maybe I can get more information from July 6th. Today I had a horrible diarrhea. Good thing I invented the toilet, since not even in my nightmares do I plan to sit in those prison seats. But the toilet paper is still shit. He got it. If Klein had been alone, he would have smashed his head against the bronze table multiple times until it bled. Rereading the joke, Klein cringed so hard that he felt like he would spit blood if he read it again. What the hell did I expect? At least this time it wasn't a sexual escapade. Klein tried to look on the bright side of this as he turned to the last page delivered by Chariot. April 3rd. Today I have met a woman straight as a board. Her name is Amelie, and even though she is sexy, her personality is too serious and flat. She's not my type. April 4th. For whoever is reading this. I've been outclassed and I'm not ashamed in the least. I finally met my superior and it turned out to be Amelie. I have no idea how it happened, but for a moment we went from talking about the weather to me being handcuffed, gagged, and she on top of me with a whip and a black leather corset. It turns out that Amelie's straight-laced personality is just a facade and she's actually a master dominatrix. I never thought that I would be dominated in such a hard way, that I would enjoy it so much, and that I would like tight leather and candle wax. You learn new things about yourself every day. Hidden by the dense grayish-white fog, Klein's face was completely flat and his eyebrow trembled. So this is the Amelie that Russell mentioned on his diary page last week. Klein thought while blinking, perplexed. You mentioned that she was somewhat dominant, but this is borderline hard femdom. Klein thought, and then he had a crazy idea. Russell, please tell me that in the future I won't end up reading how Amelie is sodomizing you with a strap on. Not wanting to imagine the great emperor taking it by the bumper, Klein flicked the diary pages away and looked at the Tarot Club members with a smile. Actually, you don't have to wait for me. Alger, who had already returned to his usual self, gave a slight nod. It is our honor, Mr. Fool. Wouldn't you like some polish to clean his boots while you lick them too? Adrian thought as he rolled his eyes. Ads by PubFuture. Mr. Chariot, what would I have to pay to get more information about what you know about us? Derek, seeing that the silence had already been broken, wasted no time and launched his question. Oh, you are more talkative than I expected, little son. I thought that since it was your first meeting with us you would be a bit more shy, but you are quite outgoing, don't you think? Adrian teased with a chuckle and Derek flushed a little. Perhaps I was too abrupt with how I asked the question and offended Mr. Chariot by accident. Derek misinterpreted Chariot's teasing attitude as annoyance and it scared him. He was shy, but due to the situation he was in he had brought out a more talkative side that he didn't know he had. Please excuse me if I was too abrupt, Mr. Chariot. I didn't mean to offend you with what I said, it's just not me, please excuse me. Derek tried to apologize, but his words were too rushed and he got confused about what he was going to say. I mean, Derek's voice dropped when he noticed that all the members were looking at him. His face flushed and he lowered his head in embarrassment and said nothing more. Audrey elegantly covered her mouth with her hand, trying to hide a shaky smile. He's a very shy lone wolf, she thought, pleased and happy at the timid attitude of the young man. Alger put a hand to his forehead and shook his head. Klein looked at this with a small smile on his face, internally shaking his head a little disappointed. I'm sorry, son, but I told you not to say too much. Ha 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 ha. At son's embarrassing spectacle, Adrian didn't hold back like the other members and laughed in amusement. This only made son blush redder and sink deeper into his seat as he tried to make himself as small as possible. Finally calming down, Adrian wiped away a fake tear and looked at son with a mischievous smile. You're a cinnamon roll, you know that, right? Derek, still embarrassed, slowly looked up at Chariot and asked in confusion. What is a cinnamon? Is it a kind of monster? Quote. 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 Silence filled the gray fog, but it didn't last long as a loud laugh echoed through it. It seems that the situation in the City of Silver is more serious than I thought. Klein thought seriously as he heard Chariot laugh. If they don't even know what cinnamon is, I wonder what other simple things they don't know. Do they know what chicken is? Apples. What do they eat there? With how strong son looks, it's obvious that they have protein, but I don't know what form it is. Wiping away another fake tear, Adrian shook his head with a smirk. Alf, you'd make a good comedian, little son. I haven't heard something so funny since Miss Justice said her pet drank a potion by accident. Audrey felt a cross blow and her lips trembled at the memory of that day. She even slumped in her seat a bit upon seeing the stunned look son gave her. It was an accident, she screamed inwardly, but outwardly she entered her spectator state and remained unfazed. Miss Justice had nothing to do with the conversation, but Mr. Chariot still found a way to annoy her. Klein thought flatly as he watched what was happening. Is his pathway one that is focused on provoking people? With how the man acted, it would be the most likely. Alger for his part simply stayed down, not wanting to attract Chariot's attention. This is a punishment for trying to save son earlier. The man thought seriously while looking at Chariot out of the corner of his eye. Seeing that nothing extra happened, Adrian sighed in disappointment as he shook his head. In answer to your question, little son, I'll tell you more when you're stronger. Now you're not even a Beander. What do you think you could do if I told you something important like how to escape the forgotten land of the gods? You know how to escape. Son shouted out in shock as he rose from his seat and slammed his hands against the bronze table. Adrian shook his head. It's just an example, but answer me. What could you do? Let me help you. Nothing. You couldn't do anything. Derek gritted his teeth and sat back trembling. He didn't want to accept it, but it was the truth. He was nothing now. How can he save his people being nothing? Releasing a light, calming breath, Derek looked up with serious eyes. I'm looking for the initial sequence of the sun pathway. Does anyone have it? He would become the sun that would bring his people to the world of light. No matter the cost. Well, Klein, it's your call. Adrian thought calmly as he leaned back in his seat and crossed his arms. This is the time for Klein to shine and make his image as a mysterious existence greater, and Adrian was not at all interested in participating. The sun pathway. Wouldn't that be sequence 9 barred? Audrey asked curiously. Derek thought and replied, probably, but I lack more information. It is. Alger nodded in response to Justice's question and son's doubt. It is another way of calling the pathway. Adrian added nonchalantly without further explanation. The redhead hung his head slightly and closed his eyes as he waited for the fool to speak. Quote. 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 Klein, are you going to say something? Why are you so quiet? He frowned because he felt several pairs of eyes on him. Opening his scarlet eyes and raising his head, Adrian watched as everyone was looking at him. The redhead's pupils shrank slightly, but his body expressed calm and relaxation. Adrian's mind was another story. Klein would never miss a bragging opportunity, so there's only one reason he wouldn't say anything: he doesn't know the formula yet. This is bad, very bad. The redhead thought seriously as he released his arms and rested his cheek on his palm. That means he still doesn't know the formulas for Bard, Light Supplicant, and Solar High Priest, and hasn't had his dance with death yet. Releasing a light breath, Adrian cracked his neck while slightly narrowing his eyes. That is a serious problem, but is easy to solve for someone like me. I can even speed up the creation of anti-evil fetus charms. Single quote. Since I already told him about Tingen's problem, maybe it's best to nitro the creation of those charms unless something unexpected happened and Klein has his pants downs. Adrian finally returned Sun's gaze and smiled sharply. Well, I'll see the positive side. I can win something interesting. Well, that's interesting, little son. I have the formula you want, and since no one is saying anything, I'll take your request. Adrian said as he let out a soft chuckle. Adrian held out his hand to Sun, still with a smile on his face. This formula costs 200 pounds on our side of the world. You don't have to understand what pounds are or how to get it, your situation is pretty dire and it's not worth it. So in exchange, I'll ask for something of equal or similar value. Adrian then turned to the fool and nodded respectfully. Here we seek fair and equal exchanges after all. Ads by PubFuture. Why do I suddenly feel offended? Klein thought with a slight frown. Taking his thoughts aside, Klein nodded back at Chariot. It will be in the form of information or materials. If you have doubts in the exchange, we can always ask Mr. Fool to confirm that everything is equal and fair. Adrian explained calmly, still with a smile on his face. Hey, always daring, aren't you, Mr. Chariot? Klein thought with the corners of his lips quivering at the redhead's audacity. It won't be a problem. Klein answered calmly, and Derek nodded somewhat dazedly. Derek looked at Chariot for a few seconds before asking, what would I have to give in return, Mr. Chariot? Sensing an opportunity that could be useful, Adrian let out a disappointed sigh as he shook his head. If you could only summon my messenger, I would have asked for the Phantom Netherdrake's complete pituitary gland in exchange for Bard's formula, but that's impossible. No messenger can enter the forgotten land of the gods, so sadly I'll have to settle for something else. Phantom Netherdrake's complete pituitary gland. That's one of the two main ingredients of telepathos. Audrey's eyes widened and she looked at Sun in a different light. She had been trying to find the ingredients for the potion all last week to get them ready for her promotion, but had no luck. Not even Glaint knew where to get that because it was supposed to be an almost extinct animal. If Chariot asked Sun for that, then it's because he knows that Sun's land has many. I can get any rare or normal material I need if I trade with Sun. This was a new opportunity, and Alger shared the same opinion. Not because he knew that Phantom Netherdrake's complete pituitary gland was one of the main materials for the telepathos potion, but because he knew the situation of this animal. It's obvious that the forsaken land of the gods would be rich in materials. Alger thought seriously as he looked at Sun from the corner of his eyes. He had to form a good relationship with him so that when he needed it, Sun would gladly help him. Klein also had the same thought, but also thought of something Chariot said. So no messenger can go to the forsaken land of the gods. It makes sense since not even the churches have made it. Klein's eyes lit up and he had an idea. But I can come in and out at will, so why not become some kind of ubiquitous messenger? If I get a ritual of my own that points to me, I could accept and receive messages, then I could deliver them to the other members. This way it would be a private and anonymous exchange without having to worry about their identities being discovered. Realization hit Klein that made him want to grin from ear to ear. I could even store valuable things here and no one would be able to touch them. I'm the only one who can get in here, so this is the most secure safe in the world. Derek didn't give importance to what Chariot said because he didn't understand all the subtext that was in his words. So what do you need in return, Mr. Chariot? Adrian smiled and rested his cheek in his palm again. How much history of the City of Silver you can give me? Mr. Fool will decide how much history is enough, so don't worry about missing or overdoing it. Maybe this way I can get more clues about the bastard who brought me here. Why do you include me so lightly? Have more respect for your superiors. Klein inwardly cursed Chariot's attitude, but outwardly he remained unfazed. And that was because he had something to gain by letting this go. Ads by PubFuture. History of the City of Silver. Klein thought curiously, already wanting to read what Sun was going to deliver. Derek looked at the figure sitting in the seat of honor at the top of the bronze table, but seeing that he didn't say anything, he returned his attention to Chariot and nodded. Would you like me to give it to you now, Mr. Chariot? The young man asked innocently, and Adrian's expression froze momentarily. Don't say things that can be misinterpreted. The redhead thought awkwardly, but on the outside, he smiled again. Better not, little son. It should be after you become a Beyander and also take the opportunity to reread everything. Don't let any detail escape you. Mr. Chariot, Derek said, surprised and stunned at the man's encouraging words. He had misunderstood what Chariot had said again. I swear I'll be a Beyander by next week. Derek said with conviction, and Adrian gave the young man a strange look. I think you have a different idea, little son. I said that so the potion will boost your mind a bit more and you'll be less likely to forget something. Not in a motivational way as you think. Not seeing why he continued to bother Sun and that it would be more fun to let the young man believe what he wanted, Adrian did not correct the misunderstanding. The redhead turned to the fool and without saying anything, a yellowish goat skin patched together with a red fountain pen appeared in front of him. After a few moments, Derek had the Bard's Potion formula in his hands. Sequence 9 Bard Potion Formula. Main ingredients. A crystal sunflower or an adult flint bird's tail feather or a fire bird's tail feather. A piece of siren rock or a singing sunflower. Supplementary ingredients. A blade of midsummer grass. * 5 drops of July wine juice. A blade of elf dark leaf. These ingredients are not hard to come by. I saw several of these on the market. Derek thought happily as he reread the yellowish parchment multiple times. This was his first step to becoming the Sun. You don't need to reread it. When you return to your body, just pray to me for the formula and it will come to you. Klein reminded Sun in a calm voice. Derek looked at the fool and nodded energetically. Thank you, Mr. Fool. Klein just smiled and nodded slightly at Sun. Derek lowered the yellowish parchment and watched in wonder as it faded into the gray fog. Silence returned to the Hall of Giants. Seeing that no one was speaking, Alger took the chance. I received intelligence that the pirate Kilongos, code name Rear Admiral Hurricane, has secretly gone onshore and has infiltrated Backland. I don't know what he's up to, but I hope you can help me locate his whereabouts. As for whatever happens afterward, you don't have to put yourself in danger. Alger said the last part looking at Justice while the first part was said looking at the fool and Chariot. Klein also glanced at Chariot out of the corner of his eye. As far as they knew, he was the best for this mission. I get an idea why you're looking at me, and I must say you're a bit daring, aren't you, Mr. Ear Destroyer? Adrian thought with a raised eyebrow as he looked back at Alger. If you want me to deal with Kilongos, it's better to say it than lead it. You have to be a better manipulator in this life, Mr. Hanged Man. Please improve if you plan to get anywhere. Mr. Hanged Man, if I were a woman, I would be flattered by the way you ogle me. I know I'm truly a feast to gaze upon, but do you like me so much that you can't take your eyes off me for even a moment? Adrian asked with a teasing tone and sly smile that made Alger's eyebrows twitch. Mr. Hanged Man, how is it possible that you fall for the same trick again? Klein thought flatly. While Chariot was annoying the Hanged Man, Audrey was a bit shocked by what the last one had said. Rear Admiral Kilongos, one of the 7 great admiral pirates? Audrey asked wide-eyed, almost unable to maintain her spectator state. Yes, it's him, although now it's the 8 admiral pirates with the inclusion of Captain Pale. Alger jumped at the chance to avoid the weird situation with Chariot. Another change, Adrian thought through narrowed eyes. Captain Pale. That's a curious name. What could you tell us about them? Audrey asked with her curiosity piqued. Adrian looked at the noblewoman and the corners of his lips turned up in satisfaction. Having someone as curious as Miss Bank is very useful. Now I understand why Klein liked her so much. But to the redhead's disappointment, Alger shook his head. There is not much information about this new admiral. The little that is known is that their backer is a mysterious organization and that they are a woman. Mysterious organization? Curious. The redhead thought seriously. Shaking his head, Adrian looked at Alger. Mr. Hanged Man, I am interested in your request. Is there anything I need to know before facing Kilongos? This was just to save face. Adrian knew full well what the admiral had on his hands. He knew how powerful creeping hunger was, even better than the own Kilongos. It wasn't a suicidal wish that he had either, he knew that if he was careful he would have a good chance against Kilongos. Besides, that 30,000-pound bounty and creeping hunger are too juicy for me to ignore. Adrian thought with the corners of his lips turning up a little higher. Seeing that Chariot was interested, Alger internally took a breath of relief and nodded. He is a Sequence 6 Beyander of the Sailor Pathway, a wind blessed. He also wields a powerful sealed artifact. He is quite crafty and cruel. Sequence 6 and a powerful sealed artifact, you say? Hee. Looks like I'll not only make good money but also have a new artifact, Adrian said with a sharp smile, and Alger frowned at the man's words. Klein looked at the hanged man pityingly as he lamented the man's lack of information. A small Sequence 6 won't be able to do anything against a demigod. It will be a massacre. Although, I wonder why Mr. Chariot is interested in this mission. Mr. Chariot, I seriously recommend that you don't underestimate him. The artifact that Kilongos carries allows him to use powers other than his own. He can change his appearance, invoke light to purify spirits, and sing to get stronger. People have noticed that he can make his targets crazy and enter the dreams of others. There's almost nothing he can't do. Alger described in detail, and Adrian simply leaned back in his seat with a sly smile that annoyed the Capitan. We suspect that all those abilities come from his sealed artifact called Creeping Hunger. Before he could explain further, Derek Berg, who had been listening silently, suddenly blurted out. Shepard. Not again. Klein thought internally with an exasperated sigh. The son is just a boy. Adds by PubFuture. But putting aside his inner disappointment, he thought a little more about what Son had said. Shepard. That's the name of Sequence 5 of the Secret Supplicant and Listener Pathway. Among the 6 council members in the City of Silver, there is a new elder who is a shepherd. Sun said that she was strong enough to take on a Sequence 4. Well, at least evil spirits of the same grade. Seeing that everyone was looking at him, Derek suddenly panicked a bit. He hurriedly explained with a stammer. What I meant was, the qualities explained by the hanged man are like the Beyander abilities of a pathway, shepherd. All shepherds can swallow another's soul into their body, including wraiths and spirits. They control these souls to do their bidding with an unknown method, which allows them to make use of their abilities. Hee. Easy little son, the redhead interrupted the nervous Sun with a gentle chuckle. Adrian smiled at Sun and nodded slightly. I appreciate the information, little son, but it is not necessary. I am quite familiar with the ability of the artifact of the Mr. 30,000 pounds and I know how to deal with it. Okay, Mr. Chariot. Derek said with a weak nod. Klein felt his brain go blank. Mr. 30,000 pounds. Is that the bounty Chariot is after? That's why he accepted. Goddess. 30,000 pounds. Klein glanced at Chariot and cursed in Chinese internally. Shit. I wish I had your strength, Mr. Chariot. Kilongos doesn't even know it, but that bastard was served on a silver platter for you. Poor wretch doesn't even know it, but his days are already numbered. Chariot didn't even address him by name or title just for his bounty. Seeing that Sun's very interesting explanation was cut off halfway, Audrey pouted her cheeks as she looked at Chariot. Why did you interrupt him, Mr. Chariot? You seriously don't care what he has to say? She thought, annoyed, but didn't dare say anything for fear of suffering the bully's lash. So she could only deflate her cheeks in disappointment. What sequence number is Shepard and what path does it belong to? Not wanting to be left empty-handed, she asked this question to calm her sourness. Seeing the opportunity to raise his image, Klein was about to respond, but someone else got the better of him. Secret Supplicant Pathway, Sequence 5. It is the pathway controlled by the Aurora Order. Adrian took the opportunity and responded with a mischievous smile. For fuck's sake, Mr. Chariot. At least leave something for me. Klein thought, very annoyed, feeling foam in his mouth. Sorry Klein, but only the fastest eat. Adrian thought, with his mischievous smile growing a little more as he got an idea of how upset Klein could be now that he stole his chance to shine. Audrey looked somewhat surprised, seeing how it was Chariot who responded. Thank you, Mr. Chariot. Adrian waved his hand nonchalantly. Don't worry, Miss Justice, this one is in the house. That's very kind of you, Mr. Chariot, Audrey said, a little tense. You mean I almost had to pay something? The noblewoman thought, with the corners of her lips quivering. Ads by PubFuture. Seeing that he had managed to annoy Justice, the corners of the redhead's mouth turned up slightly. He looked at Hanged Man. Since I'll be doing the heavy lifting, I'll get most of the reward, but I'll also give you a share of it. How about 2,000 pounds? Fair enough in my opinion. Alger was surprised by this but kept calm. He didn't expect Chariot to offer him a part of the reward, but that didn't mean he was going to reject it. So nodding, Alger accepted. That seems fair to me, Mr. Chariot. Seeing that the deal was about to close, Audrey panicked a bit. This was the first mission between members of the Tarot Club. This was one of the biggest reasons why she attends this gathering. She had to participate. So in a somewhat hurried tone, she joined in. Mr. Hanged Man, I also want to accept this mission. Although I can't say if I'll be able to find Rear Admiral Kilongos. As soon as she said that, she received a look from the older members of the Tarot Club. Miss Justice, you're just sequence 9 and Kilongos is sequence 6. Best case is you never find him and let Chariot take care of it. Klein thought, somewhat surprised towards Justice. I like your courage, Miss Justice. It's like a fly wanting to take on a frog in hand-to-hand combat. Adrian said in a teasing tone, and Audrey shot him a look. He compared me to a fly, she thought, stunned at the man's audacity. Her pride had been beaten a bit. Alger simply looked at Justice for several seconds. The image he had of her changed a lot. It's all right, Miss Justice. Don't try to deal with him. If you find him, notify Mr. Chariot through his messenger, or if you are unable to do so. Alger turned to the Fool, placed a hand on his right chest, and bowed. Honorable Mr. Fool, would be possible to pray to you to help us in our time of need. And what am I supposed to do? Deliver your last words to your family. Klein thought, with the corners of his lips twitching, but this was covered by the gray fog, so Justice was unable to see it. He quickly found a way to save face and spoke calmly, looking at the original trio but especially Justice. If you come across Kilongos, pray to me and I'll notify Mr. Chariot to take care of it. Seeing that his request had been accepted, Alger said gratefully. Thank you very much, Mr. Fool. Audrey couldn't help it and placed a hand on her chest and looked gratefully at the Fool. This may be a matter that for a great existence like Mr. Fool is not worth his attention, but if it is regarding the safety of one of us, he is willing to pay a little attention to it. She then also gracefully curtsied, keeping her hand on her chest. You are very kind, Mr. Fool. A small smile formed on Klein's face. It is not a problem. Looking at all this with a flat face, Adrian only made a slight bow. If they knew the truth, this would be very uncomfortable. Straightening up, Alger looked opposite from him. Regardless of your success, whether you try or not, I will definitely repay you with information or intelligence. And if you do succeed, I can pay you one of the main ingredients of telepathos, as long as I know what it is. This excited Audrey, who nodded and spoke excitedly. Sounds like a good deal to me, Mr. Hanged Man. Remember, don't face him, and if you find him, notify Mr. Chariot so he can take care of it. Alger reminded to prevent Justice from doing something reckless. I'm in Backland right now and I'm confident I can get there pretty quickly no matter where you are. Adrian added calmly. Seeing the concern of the members, Audrey nodded with more calm and seriousness. This time my life will be in danger. If I make a mistake, I have to be careful and cautious. With the message sent, Alger created Kilongo's portrait with Klein's permission and assistance. He was one of the 7 major pirate admirals. He had a distinctive broad chin, brown hair tied into a bun at the back of his head like an ancient warrior, and green eyes that seemed to hint at laughter, but were abnormally cold. He's uglier than I thought, and what's that deformed smile? It looks like he got a large stick up his ass and he liked it so much he left it there. Adrian commented when he saw the portrait. It's almost as if he had surgery to have a brick as a jaw, the redhead thought, somewhat surprised. Kilongos's jaw was John Cena's jaw levels. Puff. Ha ha ha. Having personally known Kilongos and having been his friend once, Alger was barely able to contain a laugh but couldn't contain a little snort. Audrey raised a hand to her mouth gracefully to hide the amused smile that spread across her face. Sun couldn't help it and chuckle. As a boy, jokes involving butts and sticks made him laugh no matter how depressed, quiet, or vexed he was. Even Klein almost laughed at Chariot's unexpected comment. Seeing that Kilongos's life had already been decided, Audrey took the opportunity to speak. I recently came into contact with a Beyander circle and found out about a powerful person named Mr. A. Mr. Fool, Mr. Chariot, Mr. Hanged Man, do you know this person's background and identity? I don't know what you're talking about. Derek remained silent. Mr. A. I only know of Mr. Z. But with a similar code name, could he be from Aurora Order? Klein made a guess, but he didn't answer. He wouldn't answer something he wasn't sure of. And if he had to, he would only do it vaguely, like a charlatan. The information given by Mr. Chariot and Mr. Hanged Man a few weeks ago did not mention this detail when they talked about the Aurora Order. Could they have kept this detail to profit later? Alger looked directly at the Fool and found him calm and unchanged. It was hard to read his thoughts. So, he said in a deliberate tone. Ads by PubFuture. The Aurora Order is at odds with the Church of the Lord of Storms, the Church of the God of Knowledge and Wisdom, and the Church of the Eternal Blazing Sun, so the members of these churches understand this organization better than anyone. He said the last, discreetly looking at Chariot. He didn't have to worry about hiding that he was part of the Church of the Lord of Storms thanks to that man. If there's anything you need to know, Miss Justice, the hate is well deserved. Adrian added unimportantly. Alger and Audrey looked at the man in surprise, especially Alger. Is there something deeper in the relationship between the Aurora Order and the three churches? Alger thought a little stunned, but after thinking about it a little more, he saw that it made a lot of sense. The hatred that these three churches had for each other was only surpassed by the hatred that came from the Aurora Order. All that hate couldn't be merely empty, it had to have a reason. What do you mean by that, Mr. Chariot? Why is the hate well deserved? Audrey asked with all her curiosity piqued. Adrian smiled mysteriously and said in an emotionless tone. Is not something you should know now. A chill ran down the backs of everyone present and Audrey didn't ask anything again. Then why did you say that in the first place? Klein cursed in his mind, feeling somewhat cold all of a sudden. Wanting to abandon this moment, Alger cut his explanation short. The Aurora Order has 5 saints and 22 oracles. These oracles use the alphabet as their code names, from Mr. A to Mr. X. I'm not sure if this Mr. A you speak of is the Mr. A of the Aurora Order, but there's a good chance. As for the details of the Aurora Order, I've already told you before. Audrey just nodded at the words of the hanged man. If you're talking about Mr. A's Friday party, then it's him. Adrian added again unimportantly. This earned him a look from all the members. Hey, bastard, you really don't know when to stop, do you? And what is that personality change? How do you become so cold and so provocative from one second to the next? Do you have a mental problem? Klein thought, annoyed and with his eyebrows twitching strongly. Audrey had the corners of her mouth twitching as she squeezed her dress under the table. Is there something he doesn't know? How is it possible that he knows about the party on Fridays? Does he attend them too? If he attended last week's party, that means we were in the same place at the same time. Coming to that conclusion made the calm but mischievous Chariot look much colder in Audrey's eyes. He wouldn't know who I am just because of that, would he? She hadn't found anyone with characteristics similar to Chariot's, so that was impossible, and this calmed her heart. Yes, that's ridiculous. The only thing he knows is that I'm a noble lady from Backland. Nothing else. How many more like me are there? Besides, who would think that the sweet and innocent Audrey Hall is part of a secret organization? Now calmer, Audrey even joked internally. With her mood restored, she looked around and asked. So what do we do with him? Someone like him should be dealt with immediately. Someone as evil and vile as Mr. A must be punished. Miss Justice, you don't have to worry about him. Adrian said calmly, looking at Justice. Let me ask you something. Do you really think that a party as popular as Mr. A's is a secret? That the Nighthawks, the Punishers, or the Machinery Hivemind don't know anything about it? Audrey thought about Chariot's words and came to a conclusion that made her blood run cold. It's impossible that Mr. A's party is secret to them, she said weakly, and Adrian nodded with a smile. Exactly. Mr. A's party is quite popular with the churches. But then why do they let it still exist? Shouldn't they shut it down and imprison it, since it's not only a gathering place for illegal beyonders but is hosted by an important member of an evil organization? Audrey asked, very confused. The actions of the churches made no sense in her eyes. Adrian shook his head. I'll answer your question with another one. Do you know how many illegal beyonders are in Backland? What do you think would happen if the churches shut down all the illegal parties they know of? Audrey thought for a few seconds, and thanks to the knowledge gained by spectators, she came to the answer. There are many more than the church can document and lock up. If they shut down these parties, the only thing they will do is make illegal beyonders roam free without being able to control them. With that said, she added, they use the parties to control and document illegal beyonders. Bingo bingo, Adrian exclaimed with a smile. Not all illegal beyonders are evil, and as long as they don't do evil acts and don't get into trouble, the churches usually give a blind eye to them, but obviously don't let them run free, and one of their ways of controlling them is with these parties. Quote, Mr. A is a necessary evil that they are willing to tolerate. But not without care. He then chuckled a bit before continuing. At each party, you can bet that there are a minimum of 5 teams from the churches waiting for him to make a mistake to finish it off. Mr. A is basically in a giant rat trap, he added with a laugh. At this information, Audrey nodded gracefully. I'll have to think carefully if it's worth going to that party again. What a pity, she thought disappointed. Just when she had obtained another source apart from the Tarot Club, she had lost it. Thank you very much for this information, Mr. Chariot, Mr. Hanged Man. How much would I have to pay for it? You're a fast learner, Miss Justice, Adrian teased the noblewoman before saying in the same teasing tone. Today I want £210 with some tomato sauce on the side, please. You're hopeless, Klein thought with his face flat. Audrey just sighed and nodded. Deal, I will send you the money through your messenger when today's gathering ends. She then turned to the hanged man who after a few moments of silence said £150. Alger hadn't had a chance to say more, so he would have to settle for that amount. Having earned more money, Adrian's smile brightened, but it only lasted a few seconds before it disappeared and his face turned serious. He looked at the figure at the top of the bronze table. Mr. Fool, I have more information about our little problem. Klein tensed for a moment before relaxing and letting out an inward sigh. Good.